Hey guys, how you doing today? So, Rex Murphy goes on Jordan B. Peterson's podcast and does about a 2-hour interview. When one of my subscribers pointed this out to me, I did a long sigh and said, I knew I was going to be spending like 8 hours dealing with Rex Murphy one day, and here we are. And so sifting through this interview between Jordan Peterson and Rex Murphy, I got struck really hard by how overt and obvious it is that Rex Murphy is a white supremacist. Now, I'm not saying that he's putting on the Ku Klux Klan hat and that he's going to rallies and organizing with people who are actively trying to purge the society of minority groups. But I am saying that here's a guy who proudly stands up and says out loud to everyone that Canada has no systemic racism in the country.
We got to stop fascinating on the color of people's skin, which is what identity politics sometimes just turns into. I have never seen a time when our country in 2021, I wrote a column about this, is not systemically racist.
So with a proud little smirk, he says, I wrote an article denying the existence of systemic racism. Here's the article right here. So egregious was this, and so loud was the outcry towards the National Post for uncritically publishing this, that the National Post put this on the article. Now, they didn't retract it, mind you, but how many articles have you read that have a literal statement of this is an outrageous view, and here's links to several articles that counter it. But this should be hardly surprising, right? It should be hardly surprising that a man like Rex Murphy is delusional in this regard. I mean, for goodness sakes, during the interview, he made several statements about his opinion towards climate change. Here they are.
All his private so-called commitments to this farcical global warming being the worst. Mr. O'Toole, the most recent thing he did was to embrace this superstitional folly of apocalyptic global warming and promise his own carbon tax.
So if you're going to make these sorts of claims towards the largest existential threat that exists here in Canada, guess what? We can safely dismiss any opinion you have. Like if there was an invading army trundling towards us and coming to destroy our civilization and destroy our families and destroy everything we had. We could see them, we knew they were coming, and there was somebody around you who was actually saying, no, that army doesn't exist, we don't need to worry about it. How seriously would you take their opinions regarding literally anything else? So Rex Murphy and Peterson, incidentally, completely discredit themselves as intellectual speakers and social analysts or criticizers through this enormous denial of the largest existential threat that exists in our society. And so it's hardly surprising that somebody who has deluded themselves so thoroughly on an issue that is so completely resolved, that they would also delude themselves into being white supremacists. But before we get into that, please be sure to like, please be sure to share and subscribe. My Patreon is down below. If each of my subscribers donated $2, I would be paying rent with this channel. Please think about donating and supporting leftist voices. Please think about at least subscribing and joining the community that we've got going on here. We've got to push back against capital, and the way that we're going to push back against capital is through supporting leftist voices like mine. Thanks, and so now let's talk about Rex Murphy's white supremacy.
The university experience was the strongest because the universities then had values. They worshipped, and that's a good word, not to be backed off from. They worshipped the best creations, the best fashions, the best styles of thought, the best scientific finesse, and they made you, not made you, they induced you to be grateful, to be grateful for what other first-rate minds have contributed to the temper of the entire human race.
So imagine you met somebody and they got talking about Bill Cosby, right? And that they were like all talking about how amazing Bill Cosby was and how smart and intelligent and how we should all worship Bill Cosby, right? This is what Rex Murphy sounds like when he starts talking about the people he was educated by, right? Well, when he gets to talking about how oh, there were all these great thinkers and we should venerate them and worship them and all of this. And of course, if you've deluded yourself into believing that this is a perspective that is good, then of course, if anybody comes along, right? If anybody comes along and says, oh, hey, maybe we should be critical of people who are writing during a residential school genocide. Maybe we should be critical of people who literally owned slaves, right? Maybe we should have a more critical eye of people who are willing to inflict this kind of hardship against minority groups, women, right? Other civilizations. But if you're Rex Murphy, no, you can't do that, right? You can't criticize these thinkers and speakers, and you have to defend them, right? And of course, if you are going to defend capitalism and Western, what they call Western civilization, but of course Rex Murphy means white people, if you're going to actually stand up and defend these things, then you have to be delusional, right? You have to delude yourself. Because if you admit that climate change is real, right? If you admit that Canada has systemic racism, then this means you have to admit that the structure of your civilization, the structure of capitalism itself, is in some small way even fraudulent or capable of error or in need of reform. But if you're standing around saying that you need to worship people, to worship these guys, then of course you're going to end up saying hysterical rants and ridiculous nonsense like this.
We have stripped the nation of its self-confidence, that's one thing. We have alienated and put out in the outer darkness a vast portion of the population. They are not listening to its cultural leaders or the Illuminati or the clerisy. People are afraid. Political correctness is a very feeble phrase to cover the psychological landscape in which people of moral character are afraid to say what is extremely obvious. We're polluting the political system and the intellectual system. And finally, aside from you, on a large scale, aside from you, no one is resisting this tidal force that is emphatically cheapening the culture.
The truth of the matter is that the society is going past and superseding a person like Rex Murphy, right? Like 20 years ago, Rex Murphy could have been considered high-level intelligentsia, living in the culture that he lives in, that was denying the existence of systemic racism, that didn't care about the residential school genocide, that didn't care about slavery. But now we're living in a culture that is actively exhuming the bodies of First Nations children from a mass grave that comes out of the residential school system. We don't buy in to this bullshit that Murphy is peddling. And it makes him sound like a crass, cruel sociopath who's completely disconnected from the reality that's around him. And fundamentally, that's true, right? He lives in some cottage somewhere. He doesn't actually read the news or at least comment on it in any significant way. And all he does these days is bemoan the fact that people aren't permitting him to be a racist any longer. And all he can do is turn around and whinge about it like this.
This whole game of taking the great documents of Western civilization as a hunting ground for moral woke offense. Well, first of all, it's catastrophically stupid. If you have the 40th Symphony of Mozart or the Beethoven's Fifth, and the only reason you're playing it is to find out if either Mozart or Beethoven had a sexist attitude, you're out of your mind.
Yes, we're certainly the ones that are in fault, Rex. We're not letting you be an old racist white man anymore. That we're the problem here. That's absolutely the case. And so why is this important? Why is it important to look at people like Rex Murphy and say what I am saying here? Because millions of people read Rex Murphy and thousands of them agree with him, right? That he ends up being a cultural lightning rod where white supremacists and racists can go to read his stuff and agree with him that, oh yeah, Canada doesn't have systemic racism as we exhume a mass grave of First Nations people. Canada doesn't have this culture. And in fact, you're right, Rex Murphy. Climate change, the largest existential threat that exists, it's all so super overblown. While we're in the middle of one of the hottest heat waves that Canada has ever experienced. The absurdity that it is taking YouTube voices that no one in the mainstream is willing to really stand up and say, National Post, you need to stop publishing Rex Murphy because it discredits your whole organization to have a political commentator inside of the halls of power saying that systemic racism doesn't exist, climate change doesn't exist. This is a major, major problem that has massive political ramifications, right? There are people in the Conservative Party who still believe that climate change is not real. This is a massive, massive, massive problem. And we could use intelligent speakers like Rex Murphy actually attempting to convince the populace that, hey, maybe we should do something about systemic racism. But at the end of the day, he's not going to do that because Rex Murphy is a white supremacist. All right, guys, this is the end of this video. Please like, share, subscribe. If every single one of my subscribers gave me $2, I could pay my rent. I would really appreciate any support I could get. I mean, and if you've made it to this point, I think it's interstellar law. You have to like and share and subscribe, right? So, you guys are doing really well out there. I know you are. The billionaire class spends billions and billions of dollars to gaslight you, to convince you that you are less than what you are, to say that you're lazy or dingy or to insult you and make you feel guilty about just enjoying yourself in the world for 30 seconds. Don't let them, right? We're talking about high-level sociopaths who are supporting people who are ignoring climate change and ignoring the realities of systemic racism. We don't need to listen to these people anymore, right? You are a divine being living in divine energy. We could use some of it right now. Good luck. We're gonna need it.